This is Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo. The trial, from the evidence, what is it? It's personal use drugs. That's all it is. That and swingers, a lifestyle, but the prosecutors have charged one of the most serious statutes on the books. They called threesomes and drugs as RICO. How compelling of an argument is it that Sean Combs, he's got an interesting lifestyle. It's not one that a lot of people maybe on the jury would condone, but it's not illegal, and it's certainly not the type of lifestyle that you would charge a gang leader or a mob leader with.
Well, I said earlier, I think that the defenses would need to paint this prosecution of being overzealous, and they went above board, or above and beyond, in trying to say that Mr. Combs was a mob boss, that his sexual deviant lifestyle equated to sex trafficking and racketeering. So I think that's what they're doing here. He's saying, look, the prosecution saying that because he had consensual sex with women in different states, that amounted to sex trafficking and this being racketeering. I think that's what the defense has to do. They need to say that the prosecution here has it out for Mr. Combs, and they're trying to convince this jury that just because he does these things consensually, that equates to this being a crime, one of the most serious crimes that's on the books, and his life is on the line if he's sentenced.
And then another line here, William, I'll have you react to. Mark Agnifilo says, Sean Combs is a self-made Black entrepreneur. He has built real businesses that are so outstanding that others create partnerships with them. We heard that from Derek Ferguson. It is hard to be Sean Combs. How many witnesses said they were moved? And I think back to there was kind of just an interesting thing I kept picking up, even in some of the lesser known witnesses in this trial. George Kaplan was an assistant who said that he had to clean up after some of these freak offs, but still after all of that, you have people who would, at the end of the day, when the defense would cross-examine them, they would say they still had some sort of admiration or complicated relationship with Sean Combs. How do those non-sexual relationships factor into the argument the defense is trying to make?
Well, look, we all know that Mr. Combs is a self-made man. He has been very, very successful, not just in music, but in all these other businesses that he has. I mean, there's no way around that. And it's important for the defense to highlight that, right? Because one of the things you want to do in your closing argument, especially if your client doesn't testify, and especially if you don't call any witnesses on your client's behalf, is you want to humanize your client. And you want to remind the jury that this isn't just some guy off the street. This is an individual who has done very, very, very well in life. And I think that that's what those witnesses were referring to. And it cuts both ways, because we also know that as part of the RICO, the sex trafficking, there is this idea of coercion and intimidation. So it does cut both ways. But I think it's incumbent upon defense counsel to do their best to humanize Sean Combs, especially in light of the prosecution's closing argument.
Some good questions coming in from our chat. We really appreciate it. Keep them coming. We'll make sure that we'll have our panel answer them as we're live on the air following Sean Combs' defense team's closing arguments. This is from Steph Frank 1234. Aaliyah, could the jurors not be paying attention if they have already made their minds up?
Could they? Yes, because we are humans and sometimes we tend to look off into space sometimes. I hope that they are not, because if they were, that means that they were not listening to all of the evidence from an unbiased standpoint, as a juror is supposed to do, right? The whole purpose of a jury is to be unbiased, to listen to all of the evidence that's presented from both sides and not make an opinion until all of the evidence has been presented. That said, this has been a case that has been, very, very highly publicized. The famous 2016 Intercontinental video came out long before this trial, right? So it would be hard not to, from the human standpoint, not to have an idea of who you think Mr. Combs is based off of seeing that video, one way or another, right? Again, we hope the jury has not done that. We hope that they have listened to all of the evidence, and then only after all of the evidence has been considered and applied the law to the facts that have been presented, will they make an unbiased decision.
And Tyler, here's another question that I think would actually end up being probably debated in a law school class if this is a guilty verdict. Kelly B's 6578. If prostitution is legalized in the U.S., can they then appeal the charge of transporting across state lines to engage in prostitution if Sean Combs is found guilty of that?
So Great question. I do not think that under federal law, prostitution is going to be made legal in the U.S. I could see maybe a state like Nevada allowing brothels in certain areas, but I don't see any way in federal legislation that prostitution will be made legal. For example, marijuana is able to be consumed in some states recreationally, but still in a federal law, it's still a crime to engage in recreational use of marijuana. So therefore, I don't see it happening. And that would be some lofty, more so of a plea for some pardon if he's prosecuted under a crime. I think that becomes legal maybe in the state of New York or other places.
Yeah, and if we're dealing with a guilty verdict, the pardon conversation, I'm sure, will be coming hard and fast right after that. As far as on the news, here's some more updates coming in from these closing arguments. Quote: "The assistants were moved by Sean Combs. It was like Harvard Business School. He pushed me hard. Did they always like him? No. Let's not even go there. Did they like him? No. But they loved him, even the ones who are suing him. Mia, I'm not going to call her Mia because that's not her name. I'm going to call her the witness who testified as Mia. Remember Derek Ferguson from the Bronx? He said, there were not many hiring people like me from the Bronx. There's something more to these businesses. Sometimes the real things in life are hard. No one remembers the easy days. These people grew. It was real. It was diversity. These days, DEI, Combs was doing it at 24. William, what's your reaction to some of the lines that we're hearing from and the approach that Diddy's team apparently is taking?
Again, it's an effort to humanize Combs. It's an effort to remind the jurors of everything that he's accomplished in his life. It may be an opportunity to reach out to some of the younger jurors and essentially say, this gentleman, this superstar isn't, again, just some random criminal. And just perhaps, the government is picking on him because of his success and because of his success as a black man. I mean, race does factor into these things. Race is something that has come up during the course of this trial. We had the issue with the juror that was dismissed, and race is live. Race is a live issue. And every single thing that goes on in this courtroom is important to the jurors. And to point out, as the defense counsel did, that, Sean was involved in DEI before DEI was a thing, that's reminding them of where Combs came from, what he's done, and what he's accomplished. And I think it's important to do that. Now, whether or not that holds sway at the end of the day is a different story entirely. But at this point, in the very beginning of defense counsel's closing argument, again, it's important to humanize who their client is and remind the jurors of everything he's done prior to being charged with these crimes.
Aaliyah, another great question coming in from Benoit 4904. Your second question, we really appreciate you dropping those into the chat. If Diddy's found guilty and sentenced to 10 to 25 years, is there a chance he could be released before serving the full sentence?
Yes, there's always a chance that you can be released for good behavior, for time served, that he'll be credited for the amount of time that he's been in jail leading up to the trial. And there's always an opportunity for individuals to be released early. Yes, of course.
And then Tyler, Game of Tunes 2947, with a question I frankly asked myself a couple times over the past 7 weeks. When does this trial end? I heard possibly today or Monday.
I think closing arguments are going to end today. The jury will start deliberating on Monday. And if I was a defense, I would like a longer deliberation period than a shorter deliberation period. I think the fact that they're going to take the weekend off and start deliberating on Monday could lead to there being a quicker deliberation, because these jurors, there's going to be no way they're going to go home and not think about the case at all. They may be thinking about some facts that came out during closing, and they'll finally be able to talk to each other as a group on Monday. But this case, I think, is going to be over possibly on Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday at the latest. The longer deliberation, I think that means the jury is struggling to convict. If it's a quick deliberation, I think it means that they are quickly leaning with the prosecution.
And it's interesting, too, because we officially know, we learned this morning that the jury will, which is what we were expecting, get the case on Monday. But it's a short week next week because the 4th of July is on Friday. William, how could that short week factor into whether or not we're here a couple weeks from now still going on? I mean, how long could this theoretically go once it goes to deliberations?
I mean, that's always the $64,000 question, right? We never know how long jurors are going to deliberate. They can deliberate until they have a verdict or until they reach out to the judge and say that they don't. Um, I don't love the fact that it's a short week. As a defense attorney, I don't usually like jurors to get cases right before either a long weekend or a holiday, simply because you want jurors to be able to take the time and to go through everything. I don't love the fact that it's going into the holiday week as a defense attorney. I think that jurors may unfortunately rush a little bit in order to not have to come back after the long holiday weekend. Realistically, I don't know that the jurors get the case on Monday. I think it's more likely they get it on Tuesday. I'm not sure that the jury instructions are going to be that quick. I think that today is almost entirely going to be made up of defense closing argument. And then, of course, don't forget the prosecution has the opportunity to give a rebuttal argument. We know the prosecution is a little long-winded. I think their closing itself was 4 hours and 45 minutes yesterday. I mean, that's a long argument. So I think that Monday would be optimistic for the jurors to get this case.
Before I get to a couple more of the questions that are coming in fast, which we appreciate, update again from the courtroom. Mark Agnifilo says, the prosecutors call his business racketeering. That's the fake trial. What happens? He gets arrested. They destroy his property. They have an SRT, special response team. They're clandestine, can't follow with a camera, rampant. They ran. His kids were there. And here, 6 or 7 in the second row. So he's pointing to Sean Combs' kids. He has 7, believed to be 6 or 7 of them who are there. And of course, he has a young daughter who's an infant. So kind of bringing the family into this. Tyler, first off, I guess, is it a stretch? Because when I think of RICO, I think of Al Capone, Whitey Bulger could have been probably charged with RICO, John Gotti. Sean Combs, bad boy records. I mean, this is the person who we grow up with. Is it a challenge for really the prosecution to link something that we all kind of consumed and loved in a lot of ways with people who are mob bosses?
It is a challenge, and this is, I believe, unprecedented for a RICO charge of this nature, especially with there just being one person at the top on this case, and that's Mr. Combs being charged with racketeering all by himself. And I think that's what the defense is showing here. They're showing the overwhelming power of the government with these special teams, how they brought this case and how they've charged him with racketeering when they're saying this is really just Mr. Combs having sex with people consensually and pushing his team members very hard as he's a successful person globe-trotting across the world doing business. That's what the defense is trying to show this jury. The question really is, does the jury believe the defense position of this case, or they believe in the prosecution's position of this case? And we won't know that until there's a verdict. But I think the defense is doing a good job showing the power of the government and showing that they just went above and beyond and put a zero target on Mr. Combs' head and went all the way with racketeering that has a penalty of life in jail.
Yeah, it seems like just based off what our conversations were starting at 9 o'clock this morning, the defense is taking that approach. We're going to take a quick break. Tyler Bailey, criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney. It's been great to have you. I know you have to head out. Aaliyah Roberts, William Corbin, thank you for sticking around with us throughout the morning as we continue to follow these closing arguments. When we come back, we're going to talk to Sierra Gillespie. You know her as the host of the Scandal channel here on Law and Crime. She is in Lower Manhattan outside the courthouse. We will go there live right after the break.